And now let me lead our audience on to the next session very quickly because we're approaching the end of Literati 2021, so to say. So the next session is going to be high on adventure. It's going to be high on motivation because we've got an international speaker with us. We've got Jim with us, who joins us all the way from overseas. And he's a writer, he's a high altitude climber, and also a motivational speaker. And he's co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The Ledge. And in conversation with him is going to be Anshuman. He's a co-CLS member and also a reader. So Anshuman and Jim, if you're here with us, do make an appearance to the front stage and just take this conversation ahead.
Hello, this is Jim. How are you this evening?
Hi, Jim. How are you doing? Thank you so much, Neharika, for the kind introduction.
Thank you for having me this evening. I'm really excited to be here. I've been watching some of the other panelists, and I've learned some interesting things, and it's been very educational. So thanks for including me.
Yes, we have been seeing your comments, and it's a pleasure to have you with us on the screen now. And we are really looking forward to knowing your journey of writing the book, and not only writing the book, but also climbing the Mount Everest. So, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your book and about the two journeys that you had while making an attempt to climbing the Mount Everest?
Thank you. I've been a climber for a long time, about 39 years, and I'd always dreamed of climbing the Everest, but it seemed like a distant dream. So I slowly worked on my skills over many years and climbed higher and higher mountains in the Himalayas and elsewhere in the world. And finally went there in 2015. I was very excited to be part of a well-established team, and things were progressing fairly well. There's always difficulties at high altitude with illness and low oxygen. But we finally moved up to Camp 1 at about 6,000 meters. And that day, the day we moved there was April 25th of 2015. And that's the day a major earthquake slammed into the Himalayas. It was the biggest earthquake in Nepal in 81 years. It was 7.8 magnitude, which is quite large. And I'm a geologist, and I knew it was a big earthquake. And of course, that changed our trip instantly. Climbing the mountain was no longer important. It was a matter of trying to survive, trying to help our neighbors. And when we could get down to base camp eventually, trying to help out the base camp community and then the villages as we descended the mountain. So that changed everything. It was a challenge and uncertainty in ways that I never anticipated when I first went to go climb Mount Everest.
Got it. So the reason why I asked you this question first was so that our viewers get to know that this session, this conversation between you and me is not only going to be about the literature part of it. It's not only about the book that you have written, but it is also about how your journey has been as a climber and how you kind of got over the first failure you had because of the earthquake and how you got over that. And then finally, you achieved the target that you had set in the very beginning and you were able to climb the Mount Everest successfully. So, let's start on a lighter note, and I want to ask you, what is the view from the summit? What does it look like? And I think you have some pictures that you have with yourself to share with the audience. So if you can share your screen and if you can show us something, or if you would like to describe what that feeling is like. I mean, we are very, very interested to know what it looks like and feels like from the top of the world.
Thank you. I'm switching over to share my screen now.
Sure.
And I'm going to show you just a few pictures here to give you a feel of what it's like on Everest, including answering your question of what does it look like from the summit. So this is what it looks like from base camp from about 5,000 meters, roughly, a little bit higher. And you're looking up, and can you see the pictures?
Yes, I can see the screen.
I'll show about 15 pictures here. So this is what it's like looking up. You have to look over the Khumbu Glacier, which is that scary ramp of broken ice in the middle. And we must go through there repeatedly, and we rely upon our Sherpa partners and the high altitude porters that help us out. And when you go into the Khumbu Icefall, there's a series of ice blocks all broken up and shifting, and they slide downhill at about 1 meter per day on average. And then sometimes the entire glacier will jump forward and the ice blocks collapse. So being in the icefall is very dangerous, and there are all these slots in the ice, like cracks or crevasses, as we say. But eventually you get up to Camp 1 at 6,000 meters, and you see the walls on the left. The wall on the left is about 1,000 meters tall. The one on the right is nearly 2,000 meters tall, and we're camped on the glacier here. And this is where we were on April 15th when the earthquake hit. And that's the story that I share in the Next Everest, is about the earthquakes and the avalanches that came at us. And this terrible picture of me, it shows my fear level in the tent as those avalanches were coming down at us. I shot some video with a GoPro camera. That's just a frame of that video.
Okay, got it.
This picture, don't worry about all the details. This is of base camp. And what you see is base camp down there in the bottom of the valley and a big blue stripe with white arrows on it. That's where the deadliest part of the avalanches came down off a nearby mountain. And it came down 1,000 meters and then flowed over 1.5 kilometers sideways and blasted right through base camp. And very sadly, wounded 70 people and killed 18 people, making it the deadliest day ever on Mount Everest. My teammates and I were trapped up at Camp 1, and other people camped above us at Camp 2 were also trapped. After about 48 hours, they used some helicopters to move the wounded people to medical care, and then finally started flying us climbers and high-altitude porters and Sherpas out of Camp 1. We made it down to base camp and helped out there as best we could, cleaning up the base camp and helping walking wounded still around, and then also disassembling houses for the people who were trying to save their valuable house materials and doing a great deal of fundraising. And certainly going through something like this is very traumatic, most importantly for the people that live in Nepal and the affected countries. But psychiatrists notice that something else can happen along with the stress and post-traumatic stress, which you have probably heard of, can come post-traumatic growth. Now, this is not easy or fast, but what it says is when you go through a difficult thing, like surviving the earthquake or surviving this pandemic that we've all been trapped in the last 2 years, you can distill some meaning from that mess, and you can use that as wisdom, as strength, and learning as you move forward. So in future challenges and future uncertainty, you'll be that much wiser, that much more driven, that much more resilient. Wow. And to move things towards the summit, like you said, I took 2 years off. I waited until I thought Nepal had rebuilt their infrastructure and would welcome tourists and climbers back like myself. So I went back in 2017, once again with a good team. This is me crossing one of those crevasses on my way to Camp 2. And at a very cold Camp 3 here, as you can see, probably about minus 20, 25 Celsius. And finally, on May 22nd, we were able to make the summit push from 8,000 meters up towards the true summit at 8,848 meters and managed to summit on a beautiful morning just before sunrise. And that's what I decided to write this book, The Next Everest, to both share about the earthquake and its impacts upon the people in Nepal, but also to tell the story of how does one face those challenges and still bounce back and try and reach one's goals. And that's the story behind the book.
Got it. Understood. So we will get on to the part where we talk about how a person can grow post some kind of trauma, or what is the mental state like, or what is the symbolic meaning of the Next Everest. But before that, I would like to ask you about your journey as a climber. So technically, how many days does it take for one to climb a peak as big as Mount Everest? What is it like? Because like as a layman, we are very interested to know what the process is like.
Yes, the actual summit push in the end for my group took 5 days to the summit and 2 days down. But that is only after you've been there acclimatizing to the low oxygen and learning the mountain for anywhere from 40 to 55 days in my case. So from the time I left my home, went to Nepal, climbed, and got back to my home here in the United States was a grand total of about 66 days. So it's a very long journey. There are some groups now that go a little quicker, and they do that by getting used to the altitude on other mountains nearby. And you may have heard about people that have climbed Everest in 1 day or 3 days. That's true. They did go from the bottom to the top, just like my colleagues did in 5 days, but that's only after they've acclimatized elsewhere. So anyway you slice it, it's a very long journey filled with difficulties and uncertainties.
Sure. And what type of specific training do you go through? And I'm not only talking about the physical training, but since you mentioned that the journey is a 66-day journey, it was 66 days in your case, and you were there with your team throughout. So I'm sure during these 66 days, everyone goes through ups and downs emotionally, and the morale goes up and down. So what kind of soft skills are you trained for? Like you have to kind of boost the morale of your team also, and you have to make sure that everyone is motivated. So how do you do that, and how do you stay together as a team for such a long time in such difficult conditions?
Yeah, very good questions. And you're right, it is physically difficult, and we do physical training, but that's really only the first half of it. And the hard half is the mental resilience and the teamwork and keeping a good attitude as the challenges come at you. I think it's several things. First of all, you need to have many years of mountaineering experience so that you can learn the mountains, but more importantly, learn about yourself. And you know your own strengths, and you know your own weaknesses, and you know when you get tired and maybe you're not the best teammate. You have to learn those things about yourself and then try and compensate. And so you go on many expeditions with people and you learn when to keep your mouth shut and when to speak up and when to support others, because that's really what we're doing on an expedition and in life, is taking turns lifting each other up. I may be down today and you'll encourage me. And then next week you might be having a difficult day. And I say, oh, let me help you out. Let me help you with that thing. And we take turns lifting each other up. That's how we get through a long expedition or a long pandemic. And really what you're trying to do by lifting someone else up is spark resilience in them. Say, oh, I know it's difficult today. I know you're struggling with school right now. Let me help you a little bit. And we do that taking turns. And that's being a good team member, either on the mountain or in life. And that really recharges other people's strength and resilience so that they can catch their breath, dust themselves off, and engage with the next challenge. And those skills take a long time to learn, as well as the physical climbing skills.
I guess more than climbing a mountain, this is more like a team building activity or a practical leadership course where you're trapped with a group of people, and you have to adapt to the difficult conditions that are there, and then you have to kind of maintain a balance with these people. But like talking about leadership and talking about morale, what I would also like to know is that during these 66 days, you also get a lot of time alone. You get a lot of time with yourself, just like you said. And
Right.
it is important to know yourself first before trying to motivate someone else. So, what I would like to know here is that during this journey of 66 days, is there something about yourself that you realized for the first time in your life? Or is there something that, struck your mind when you were sitting alone and you realized that since you had the time to contemplate things while you were alone there, you could realize some things about yourself which you might not have realized if you were leading a simple life.
Yes, over the years in climbing, you do learn a lot about yourself. And some things you find out that are very rewarding about where your strength and your skills and your drive come from. And sometimes it's not too pleasant. You find out I'll make this up, when I get hungry, I get very irritable and I can be impatient with my teammates. Well, that's an important thing for me to know and then try to fix in myself. And that's what I think one of the big advantages of taking a big challenge on is that you slowly refine yourself into a better version of you, including your flaws and including your skills. And when you're on Everest, you have a lot of time, as you say, sitting in the tent, staring at the frozen walls. And what I learned most on this trip is I'm a very energetic person. And so I always admired people that were perseverant. And you can say a lot of words similar to that: tenacity and grit and energy and drive. And those are all positive things about perseverance. But when you're trapped in the tent and the storm is raging, in the case for us, day after day, I got tempted to leave. I was so impatient and I was so sick of being in camp. I was there about, it was day 54 and we still hadn't gone up for our summit push. But I realized that there's another form of perseverance, and that is patience. Patience
That's
is
true.
passive perseverance. And so what that means is, in the case of a storm, if you quit and leave the mountain during the storm, or you quit while you're still waiting for your turn to try the summit, you've kind of locked in the non-success. You've left the mountain before you had your chance. But if you can be patient, it is a form of perseverance. If you wait long enough, the storm will end. And if we wait long enough, this pandemic will pass and we can go back to our lives. And that's the biggest thing I learned on Everest, that patience is passive perseverance.
Got it. So the other similarity that you and I have is that I also get irritable when I don't get food to eat and when I'm hungry.
We
So
all
that's one
have
thing.
our things to work on.
Yeah. So you talk about patience and you talk about perseverance. So what I would like to ask you is that have you ever practiced any form of meditation, maybe during those 66 days or maybe generally in your life? Since I'm sure that you've practiced a lot of patience in your life and you've been very resilient and perseverant, that even after that earthquake, even after having a failure, you still went ahead with it and you did it anyway. So is there any kind of meditation that is involved in your life, or how do you kind of uh, work on your mental fitness? That's what I would like to ask you.
Thank you. I haven't really studied meditation in a formal sense. I know some of the techniques used, and I'll use some of them myself to try and calm myself down and steady breathing. And I think for me, it's been a form of sort of mental focus, which is when I get in a situation where I'm scared or uncertain, is to try and slow down using some of the breathing techniques that we might use in meditation more formally, but also to look inside myself and say, why did I come here? And to, I came here to climb this mountain, but really to be with these people and refine myself into a better version of me, to challenge myself to experience this country. So maybe the rainstorm's going on for 6 days and our plane is left without us. And I might get upset about that if I'm thinking about planning, but instead look inside and say, I came here to learn something. And I came here to be with these people in this beautiful environment and meet the people in Nepal. And that's what I'm doing. It just happens to be in a rainstorm while my plane is already left. So it's sort of a recentering from a mental standpoint. And that basically calms me down and hopefully allows me to be a better team member during those times of uncertainty and difficulty.
Okay. So we've talked about your mental state and your physical state while you were up there, right? What I would like to ask you now is that what about your mental state when you came back after the earthquake, after you had faced a failure and something that had been preparing for since so long, you couldn't do it. So, of course, it must have been demotivating in the beginning, but how did you get over it? And what was your personal mental state like at that time?
Yes, when I came home from the earthquake, I felt so bad for the people in Nepal and neighboring countries. They had suffered many deaths, almost 9,000 deaths from the earthquakes and avalanches and aftershocks. There were hundreds of thousands of buildings wrecked. And I wanted to do something, but I could no longer move rocks and building pieces from my home country anymore. So that's when I got involved with the fundraising and got interviewed a lot, try and spread the word and do more fundraising. And that helps. When there's a difficult situation, it often you can get out of your bad mental state by helping others who are in greater need. And so by doing the fundraising, that kind of lifted me up a little bit temporarily. But I also knew that Nepal depends heavily upon tourism. They need tourists and trekkers and climbers like myself. So I kind of watched to see if Nepal could rebuild itself. And after 2016, 1 year later, I saw that they were welcoming tourists and climbers back. So I began to think about going back. And I had many fears and uncertainties. I'm a geologist by training and by my former career. So I first looked at it from a scientific standpoint. And as I shared in the book, when I looked into it, I thought perhaps there's less earthquake risk now because some of the seismic pressure has been released. But in fact, because of the way the plates tore, there's in fact more seismic energy pent up. So there's going to be more earthquakes. And that really set me back. I know there'll be more earthquakes and aftershocks and thus avalanches. So I was very hesitant at first, but really what I did is looked inside myself again and thought, why did I start doing this? Well, I did this to try and climb Everest for sure, but also to be in those adventure situations and see these beautiful parts of the world. So it took me a while to come back to it, but I also realized, again, looking to my own personal source of resilience, that I was very fortunate. I've lost climbing partners and loved ones and mentors along the way, and I'm still here, and I still have the capacity to go back. And so I kind of had to pick myself up and say, I should go back because it's an opportunity for me. It's an opportunity to go back and see Nepal, but also it kind of honors the things that other people have taught me. And that's something important that I've discussed in the book is if you know where your personal resilience comes from, you'll be able to dig into it that much faster when you're in a tough situation. So self-knowledge is very important, and you can use that, whatever it is that inspires you, to try and deal with the next set of challenges.
I completely agree with you on that. And the next question that I would like to ask you is that it's not only about yourself, it's not only about how you picked yourself up from that situation, but also your team members. There were other people who were there with you. How did you kind of motivate them since you were leading the group? How did you make them realize that this is not the end of the world and there are other things that can be done, and still Mount Everest is there and you still have the opportunity to climb it and succeed in what you had planned for? So how did you kind of motivate them? And I mean, we talk about leadership skills in corporates and uh, other organizations, but I think this task in itself would have been a huge leadership role for you. So how did you kind of fulfill that?
Yeah, thank you. I've been an expedition leader on other expeditions. To be clear, I was not the leader on either one of these Everest trips. I was one of the members.
Okay.
So
Okay.
our leader, Emily, at Camp One during the earthquake in 2015, one thing she did was she set sort of a tone on how we were going to behave. When the first earthquake and avalanches came towards our camp, we were all very scared, including me, as you saw in that photograph of me from Camp One. Very, very wide eyes showing my fear. But she talked very calmly, and she had calm gestures. And she said, I know it's very scary, but the worst avalanches happened earlier. We survived those. We're going to get through these. When she got on the radio, she was very calm. So she demonstrated that she's going to behave in a calm, professional, clear communicating way. And we kind of picked up that tone and started to copy her. And so one thing that I've learned as been a leader, and I've volunteered on rescues, is by taking some action, even if you don't have all the solutions, by stepping forward and setting a tone and taking some action, you can spark others into action. So when I got to base camp, some of my colleagues were talking about going over and trying to dig through the rocky debris to try and recover some medical equipment from the one and only medical field hospital that had been overrun. And I realized, yes, that's something we can do. So I get very energized and I try to recruit other people, and that positive energy becomes an uplift. And that's something that I think is important, whether you're a leader by name or whether you're just one of the team members like myself. By stepping forward and putting out the energy saying, come on, everybody, let's go dig through those rocks. Let's try and do some fundraising. Whatever it is that you can help out, people feel that positive energy and it lifts them up. So you try and be part of the upward spiral of energy and a positive attitude for solving the problems.
Right. So I think what you mean here is that empathy is very important in helping yourself bounce back from a difficult situation. So I guess what you're trying to say here is that empathy is one of the most important traits that a person can have. So if you could shed a little more light upon that fact, that what is the importance of empathy as per you, since you've been in such tough situations, you've seen people suffer. So according to you, what is the importance of empathy in our general life?
Well, even though somebody in the earthquake or in a pandemic may be tired and overwhelmed and have problems, when you look at somebody else whose problems are worse, you realize, first of all, you don't have it that bad. It felt bad before, but here's somebody else who has bigger problems. And by giving some of your energy, your time, and your financial resources, you can lift them up. And it's very, very empowering to do that. You're not only helping them, you're helping yourself. And as you lift them up, others will see that example and contribute as well. So even in a difficult period, is like the earthquake and the avalanches, once I realized I was okay, I tried to think about my tent mate, people next to me, and then we talked to other teams nearby that we hadn't particularly talked much before. And you kind of lift yourself up and it becomes an outward rippling circle. And so by putting some empathy out there, you encourage others to do the same thing. And we send out ripples of resilience through the community around us. So try and be the spark to get resilience going in others. And that requires the empathy and requires taking action, not just feeling empathy, but putting in some action effort to help out.
Got it. So talking about your writing journey, when is it that you decided that you are going to document this journey of yours and you're going to put it out into a book? When is it that you decided that, and what is the correct audience for this book, for the people who are watching this? I mean, is it for mountain climbers? Is it generally for people? What is your opinion on that?
Certainly the Next Everest, obviously mountaineers would like to read it for sure, and adventurous people, but I realize that's a small audience. I try to reach a much broader audience. And that's even part of the title. I talked about the Next Everest because non-climbers would say to me after I went back in 2017, oh, you've climbed Mount Everest. Will you quit climbing now? And I thought, no, that's odd. There's always another mountain, even it may be smaller in altitude or elevation. There's always a Next Everest. And more broadly in life, that means there's always a next challenge. There's always a next opportunity. And so that's the sort of double meaning of the Next Everest, is that there's always a Next Everest in life. It might be a pandemic. It might be an economic crisis, a personal challenge in your family. And so we have to try and be as resilient as we can and lift each other up, like we've been talking about. So I think it really, the most important lessons are not about mountaineering. It's not a book teaching you how to climb. And there are many Everest adventure books to read for pure adventure. And I put that in there for sure, but more importantly, sharing the lessons about being resilient and being ready for that next set of challenges. So that's the audience I was trying to reach. As far as when I decided to write the book, I've always kept careful journals when I go on adventures, and some not at home, but mostly on my adventure trips for almost 40 years now. So I kept careful journals, and I kept video dialogue recordings as well. So when after the earthquake, as an environmental geologist, I felt obligated to share what I had seen and experienced. Because as I shared in the book, Next Everest, I walked around base camp trying to understand physically what had happened, because I figured I was one of the few geologists right there at ground zero of the earthquake and the avalanches. So I knew I wanted to share what happened, but I thought the story would be incomplete until I went back and sort of faced Mount Everest again and asked myself what I had learned on this journey. So that's why I waited to start the serious writing until after I had summited the mountain in 2017. And that's when I knew that I had certain things to share about the earthquake, but more importantly, about the journey of resilience and dealing with the change and the challenges.
I completely agree with you on that. The way the book has been written, it completely signifies the meaning of the next Everest. It does not mean the next mountain for sure. It means the next challenge, the next opportunity. And I guess we are all facing the next Everest every day in our lives. When we see a problem coming up, when we see an opportunity coming up, there's something tough that we have to do. And we kind of, sometimes we are successful, sometimes we are not. But anyway, we try and keep going forward in our lives. So I completely agree with you on that, and I just really hope that this book gets converted into a film maybe someday, because people would really be inspired by what your journey has been like. And this is something which is inspirational and motivational for each and everyone. So for all the viewers listening to us, I would really recommend this book. And one very interesting thing that you mentioned was that people talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, but nobody talks about the post-traumatic growth that can be there. So if you could speak a little bit about that, that what do you think post-traumatic growth looks like? And since we are all into a pandemic, we are going through a pandemic, we are all traumatized to some extent. How do you think we can get over it in a way where we are not only coping up with it, but we are also growing along the process? So, what would you say to that?
Yeah, you made a great point. I mean, this pandemic has been traumatizing for all of us at different degrees. Things at work, at school, at home, they've all changed. And we didn't ask for these things, and some of them are very difficult. And we've lost people along the way. And sadly,
Yes.
we'll probably lose more people as we move forward, and science leads the way through this pandemic. But as I've learned, I've lost climbing partners in the mountains. I've lost loved ones in my life, as most of your listeners have right now. And you have to struggle through that for a while. Post-traumatic growth is not a magic antidote or a solution to post-traumatic stress. After you've been through a traumatic event, the stress is real. The bad thing happened. We've lost some people along the way. We can't change those terrible facts. But what we can do is look at that and ask ourselves, okay, that was very difficult, but there must be some value here. There must be some way
Yeah.
to take the bad thing and distill some lessons and some energy and some value out of it so that we can carry that forward to the next challenge, the next opportunity, the next Everest, as I say.
Right.
It's not an easy process, and you can have both at once. You can have the post-traumatic stress and the post-traumatic growth going on, and it's a journey that takes years. The first book I co-wrote with my co-author Kevin Vaughn was called The Ledge, and that was about losing my climbing partner when he passed away on Mount Rainier in the Northwest United States. In order to share that story, it took 19 years after the accident before the book came out, because it took a long time for me to be comfortable with what happened and be willing to open myself up and share what happened with Mike and I. But in sharing your pain and the lessons from it, you basically have the opportunity to lift up somebody else. And I think that's very important for listeners who are currently a writer or want to be a writer, which is you have to kind of look at the difficult things in your life and ask yourself, what can I share from that will lift others up and show them that nobody's life is perfect. You may see perfect pictures on their Instagram or their Facebook. Everybody has challenges. And so you have to share your challenges and your difficulties, but also the lessons from that. And the beauty of post-traumatic growth is that even though you went through the difficult time, you're now wiser, more experienced, more resilient, and you carry that with you forward. So even this terrible pandemic has taught us things that we're going to carry forward. I mean, think about the things you know now that you didn't know 2 years ago. They were hard won, they're
Exactly.
difficult to learn, but you have them now and they're a part of you. And that's post-traumatic growth.
Right. So before we conclude the session, I think we all want to know that what is the next Everest for you? What next? I mean, you are someone who has a great story. Your journey has been very inspirational. It is so good to talk to you. So, and you are fairly a young man. We can all see that. So, what is the next Everest for you? That's what we want to know.
Yeah, I will certainly keep on climbing mountains. None will be taller than the Everest for sure. I continue
Yeah.
to climb. I went to Peru in 2019, had hoped to go on an international expedition this year, but with the pandemic, that's not happening. So right now, I think my next Everest is similar to all of us. We're trying to stay fit physically and mentally at home and help out your community a bit and your family where you can. And as the pandemic lowers, hopefully getting back out there and continuing to do your work. For me, it's been a lot about finishing this book, The Next Everest, and sharing it through great festivals like this and interviews I've done. The book's come out in 6 international editions, so I've been doing a lot of conversations internationally, sharing about the book
Right.
because the pandemic is a bit like Everest. It's long and uncertain and unsettling, and we're all struggling through it as best we can, trying to lift each other up where we can. So that's my current task that I've pinned on myself, is to try and share the lessons from the Next Everest. but still keep my climbing sharp and keep my writing sharp. And when things start to lift, then look for that next personal challenge of maybe mountains and maybe writing. We'll see how it goes.
Right. So hopefully we've been through the worst part of this Everest, which is the pandemic, and hopefully we're out of it. So let's hope for the best there. And about your writing journey, when can we expect the next book from you?
I need to catch my breath first. I think it will probably be in the range of 2 years or more. I always want to make sure that I've kind of finished the journey with one particular book or one particular mountain. And it takes a while after you finish a climb or finish a book to make sure that you kind of gotten your message out, had the conversations that need to be had, and then start to fill up your cup again with the resilience and energy to do the writing. So I'm kind of in that phase now, just thinking about other mountains I'd like to climb and other messages I want to share. So it'll be probably a few years till I get a new book out, because I always want to make sure that the journey that you're sharing and the lessons you're sharing are important enough for the reader to spend their time on. And so I always like to think about it a bit before I share those stories.
Okay. So any closing remarks from you, Jim?
Well, I just want to thank you and the committee for putting this fantastic festival together. It's a true honor for me to be participating from afar, and hopefully as things improve and international travel opens up, I'll be able to come over and join you in person sometime. And I just want to encourage all the readers and the authors out there just to keep doing your work. It's hard under the stress of the pandemic to keep doing your work, but we need to lift each other up. We need to share our stories and instill some bravery and resilience into each other for the difficult times ahead. So keep doing your good work even during these tough times.
Most definitely, Jim, and it is such a pleasure. And this conversation was very, very positive, and we are really looking forward to hosting you here in Chandigarh for our next literature festival. I mean, I'm sure that you have so many stories to tell us, so many anecdotes from your journey, and we would love to listen to them. I mean, half an hour is very, very less for the kind of conversations that we can have. But we will take it on from here next year when you join us here for the next Literati 2022. And till then, thank you so much for your time, and have a good morning. Have a good day because it's morning for you. So we hope you have a good day.
Thank you. Good day to everyone, and stay healthy and stay resilient.
Thank you. Bye bye.